Hi guys, happy Sunday. I hope you are all coming off just a beautiful week full of sunshine and good time outside and with one another. I love that we are in our fifth Sunday of Easter and especially coming off of Mother's Day. This passage in particular is always one of my favorites in general. It just reminds me so much of life lessons that my parents instilled in me, but also overall in the Bible, it's one of my favorite chapters because it really lays out, Jesus is just laying out a roadmap for us of when everything else happens, this is what we move towards. So I would love for you guys to join me in John chapter 13, and we're going to be looking just at a few short verses, 31 through 35. So if you want to join me in those. So really, as we open up into this portion of the chapter, Jesus just starts by glorifying God, and I think also really putting into perspective what is about to happen himself as he is about to ascend, be removed from his body. But even as he talks about this change from his body to rejoin God the Father, he's just truly giving pure glorification in the whole time. He says, when he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and will glorify him at once." Then he goes on to say, "Little children," speaking to his disciples, "I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come." Now, I don't know if anybody else was like this, but when I was growing up, I was attached to my mom's hip. I thought, well, I still do. I think she's the coolest person in the world, but especially when I was young, I did not want to miss a moment of what was happening. I wanted to be there for all of it, and I'm sure that's a little obnoxious for all you parents out there. But imagine how disheartening it was for me though when I would want to go to work with her and she'd say, "Nope, I'm going to work. You can't come with me." Or if there was something she was doing that it wasn't, I couldn't go along with her. It was so disappointing. And so I can only imagine knowing that very small scope of what was happening. I don't know if you guys could just hear my dog. He's not a fan apparently of what I'm doing. But I can only imagine the disappointment after the disciples had been with Jesus and seen so many miracles and really bonded and banded together with him to then hear this next major step. You're not able to come with me. But then he goes on to say, "I give you a new commandment. That is, you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should love one another." Now, earlier in this chapter, Jesus says, "You call me teacher, and you are right." And I find that line so interesting because it almost prefaces what he's about to say a little bit later. Even though they know who Jesus is and they know what's about to happen, it's still almost like a reminder to say, hey, remember what you've seen. You remember that you trust me. So when I tell you later, here's the one rule you must follow. I'm the real deal. This is true. And I love that about them. This is my commandment, to love one another. And what's interesting is he leaves zero doubt what love is. He gives the demand, right? This is what you follow. But then he also gives an example. My husband's a teacher, and I think all the time when he comes back explaining his lessons to me, whether it be science or math, you teach what it is, you show it, then you let them practice. That's the golden rule with it. And he shows that. But what I love with it is his example of love is so broad. I mean, this is the night before he is about to make the most heroic example of love our world and universe has ever seen. He is about to sacrifice himself, go through an unimaginable experience, all for the love of us. So when he says, "Love one another as I have loved you," we have that coming. But then we also have all these little moments of washing feet and serving food. And I think most importantly, removing judgment. And Jesus always made sure everyone had a place at the table, that everyone could come into the street and interact with him. And that's what we see. We see this full expression of love. And then, even in this very moment, right, he's saying this to the very person that is going to betray him and still showing love. And I think that's one of the biggest examples that, they call him teacher, but they don't know that piece of the lesson, what he's saying. I'm saying all this. Love one another as I have loved you, as he's saying it to his betrayer and continuing to love him in that very moment. One of my favorite sayings, I guess, that I've always heard is, my mom used to tell me this too, is character is defined by what you do when nobody's looking. And I imagine the goal of most parents is to build their kids up to be able to succeed long after they're out of the house. I know I've heard parents talk about that. I think really your parenting is determined once your kids are away from you. Is what happens when you're no longer around to look after them, and you're no longer around to say yes, no, this is what you should or shouldn't do. And this is so true even in this very passage. I know it's simplifying that almost too much, but it's true. God has shown this model of here's how we are supposed to live. Here is what God is asking in my very last moment here on earth. Here are some of my last words to you. Love one another as I have loved you. He doesn't even say my final commandment is follow me. Uphold this word that I am telling you. Uphold the Bible for forever. He doesn't say that. He makes it so clear. Just as I think parents, they say children are the legacy of their family. This is so true even in this line. And I love that even as he's talking to his disciples, he says, my children. As he continues the legacy, this is the legacy. This is what he came to do. This is my commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. The last verse in this section of the lectionary is, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. I give you this new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You should love one another. By this everyone will know you are my disciples. Oh, he couldn't have been any more clear, could he? And I think sometimes, and there's probably a million different examples we could give in this very hour for how this is happening, but sometimes we get really caught up with, there's some of these keywords right now that are like hot topic that will grab people's attention, and we hear that if we to be a fighter, or I'm a soldier, or I'm here to uphold whatever the idea is, and sometimes we work so hard to uphold a certain idea that we think should be, that we end up inadvertently removing the very singular thing that Jesus says to do. Love one another. And I know this whole probably devotional sounds real simplified in it, and even as I was writing it, I'm like, gosh, this doesn't seem, there's nothing groundbreaking in this. But I think that's why Jesus used layman's term, made it as simple as possible for every generation to come to understand, here's what I want, here's how you do it. And I know sometimes it's easier said than done, because as we know, sometimes even the little acts of love, they aren't always easy. I don't know that it was easy for Jesus to even share this in front of his greatest betrayer. But this is the example that he set, is to love one another when we agree, when we disagree, when we're in great moments, and as Jesus was, when we're in our darkest hour. we command each other to love one another. So it's simple, but it's a beautiful blessing even for me to revisit this passage on this fifth Sunday of Easter. So I hope this carries us through, especially as we all see a lot of changes coming up, and through it we pray for grace and we pray for understanding for all of us for going forward. So thank you guys. Thanks for letting me share some thoughts and praying blessings over you each. Thank you. Here, now you can watch me awkwardly stare as I try to stop this. Have a great week, guys.